Hi, I'm Nick Carlin, and do I have a ripple effect story to tell you? This story involves an 11-year-old boy, a loaded stolen pistol, and the strong right hand of a police detective. And these three things conspired to change popular music forever. Stranger than fiction, yet absolutely true. The setting of our story, New Orleans, Louisiana, New Year's Eve, 1912. I can even tell you the street, Rampart Street at the corner of Perdido Street. Our hero is an 11-year-old boy who comes from a neighborhood so rife with violence that it's been nicknamed the battlefield. By the time he was 5 years old, he witnessed stabbings and shootings, and yet all this violence hasn't changed his essential sweet nature. He lives in a one-room shack, dirt floors, with his mother and his younger sister. He will not see a flushing toilet or a bathtub until he's 21 years old in Chicago, Illinois. The family is so poor that some nights they hunt through garbage cans behind restaurants in order to get their evening meal. This night, however, the boy is expecting to earn a little bit of loot. He's 11 years old, and for the past 3 years, he's been in a singing quartet with 3 friends. It's New Year's Eve. They want to go out on street corners, pass the hat, sing songs like My Brazilian Beauty from Home. But before he goes out, he's all alone in this little shack. He's a good-hearted kid, but he's still a kid. There's the trunk that belongs to his mother's latest boyfriend. He goes through the trunk, who knows, maybe to find a sweater. Underneath clothes, he finds the pistol, a .38 loaded, a 6-shooter. He decides, at midnight, everyone's going to be making noise. If I fire this baby up in the air, I'll be making more noise than anyone else. So he tucks the pistol inside his waistband, untucks his shirt, and goes out into the night. He meets his friends. His friends find out about the pistol, of course. An 11-year-old boy is going to tell his homeboys. And that was a term, by the way, that was kind of adopted by the rappers in the 1990s. Terms like crib, hood, and homeboy were all used in New Orleans at the turn of the 20th century. So he meets his friends, they sing, they make a nice bit of loot, then it's close to midnight. This boy has a very wide mouth, so he's earned the nickname Dipper from his friends. So at the stroke of midnight, show him, Dipper, show him! He pulls out the pistol, fires 6 shots up into the sky. Not 10 seconds later, the strong arm of the law. Kid's hauled off to a prison cell where he cries the night away. Next morning, he's brought in front of a juvenile judge who says, "Son, I'm sentencing you to the Colored Waifs Home for 1.5 years." Colored Waifs Home was an orphanage on the outskirts of New Orleans. Our hero starts crying again and says, "Your Honor, I'm not an orphan, I have a mother." Judge says, "Son, she is not looking out for you, you're going to the orphanage." So in a horse-drawn wagon, still crying, he's brought to the Colored Waifs Home. First couple of days, he sticks to himself, doesn't talk to anybody, but he does have to admit that 3 meals a day in a warm bed aren't that bad. About maybe his 4th day in, he's attracted to the sound of music. The orphanage has a brass band, led by Dr. Peter Davis. Little boy goes up, points to a cornet and says, "I'd love to play one of those." Peter Davis has no use for this boy who fired a pistol on New Year's Eve. This young man from the battlefield, the worst neighborhood in New Orleans. He says, "Son, you'll never be a part of my band." Kid doesn't give up. Day after day, he goes to listen to the brass band, clapping at all their efforts. Dr. Peter Davis begins to realize this isn't a bad kid. Maybe 1.5 weeks in, he hands Louis Armstrong his first ever cornet. If you don't know, a cornet is a smaller version of a trumpet. Louis Armstrong went on to revolutionize popular music. Whether you realize it or not, popular music today has been changed irrevocably due to Louis Armstrong, and because of that teacher, Dr. Peter Davis. Louis Armstrong left the orphanage a year later with a skill. He now knew his way around the horn. For the next 8 years, he had to work as a common laborer. He unloaded banana boats on the Mississippi shoreline. He had his own little coal business. He dragged a coal wagon through the streets and sold coal for 2 pennies apiece to the people in the battlefield. But at night, into the wee morning hours, young Louis Armstrong, in the neighborhood they called him Little Louis, played his cornet in the honky-tonks, the dives, and the bars of the city. And in 1922, he got a telegram from his idol, Joe King Oliver, who was in Chicago, boy, come on up and join my band. And from 1922, when he was 21 years old, to 1930, when he was 29, Louis Armstrong revolutionized music in 3 different ways. Way number 1, he brought swing to music. He even began calling the steady beat swing. There was a whole era of jazz called the swing era. And all those musicians in those big bands, they knew they were playing orchestrated Louis Armstrong. Before Louis and swing, popular music did not move. It went pa-pa. He brought that driving 4/4 beat to jazz. Jazz, of course, begat rhythm and blues, which begat rock and roll, which begat hip-hop. Without Louis Armstrong, no 20th and 21st century music as we know it. Number 2, Louis was the first musician in history to play improvised recorded solos. Now, we know from people's letters that Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, as a party trick at the keyboard, they would make up tunes. But in the 1700s and 1800s, there was no way to capture that music, which I'm sure was beautiful, but it just went off into the atmosphere. Louis Armstrong came along at the advent of recording technology. So his improvised solos were put down on records, which could be listened to again and again. Louis Armstrong transformed jazz from the early Dixieland era of everybody playing all together and ensemble music into a soloist art. So whether you love music like, I don't know, an Eric Clapton guitar solo, a Jerry Garcia guitar solo, a Charlie Parker, Sonny Rollins, John Coltrane saxophone solo, all of these musicians know they owed a debt to Louis Armstrong, the first musician to play improvised recorded solos. And if it wasn't enough to totally revolutionize instrumental music, he also revolutionized vocal music. I dare you to check out a singer called Seeger Ellis on YouTube. He was considered a hip singer before Louis. To us, he sounds ridiculous. He sounds constricted. He sounds like his underpants are about 70 sizes too small. Then along comes Louis Armstrong, singing in a natural voice, playing tricks with the music, introducing harmonies, basically making his voice like a musical instrument. A lot of people credit Louis Armstrong with inventing scat. He didn't invent it. It was something that New Orleans musicians did as a competition on street corners. But in 1926, when he recorded in Chicago a great tune called Heebie-Jeebies, he introduced scat to the whole entire world. So Louis Armstrong, one of the great revolutionaries in music history, started out as the barefoot boy who fired a gun up into the air and was arrested at the age of 11. Now, he lived from 1901 to 1971, but like all great artists, he's still alive. I would encourage you, dive into Louis Armstrong's music. It brings nothing but joy, and it also brings spiritual nourishment. Whenever I'm down, I play a little Louis, and I instantly feel better. You get into his music, and you are doing yourself a massive favor for the rest of your life. And for the young people in this room, never doubt yourself. No matter your background, no matter your challenges, no matter the difficulties of your life, think of Louis Armstrong and what he overcame to become a giant of music. And for the adults in this room and our listeners, especially teachers, Louis Armstrong shows me never, ever, ever give up on any child. Don't count any child out, because you never know. That young person in front of you could very well grow up to be such a massively contributing member of American society. Louis Armstrong, the poster child of the ripple effect. Thank you very much, folks.